The vice president spoke at the Navy graduation today, and then this happened.
Samuel R. Norville,
Quinn M. Gonzalez,
Madison L. O'Donnell,
Bianca M. Harris,
Alfonso D.
So that is the vice president of the United States, a former Marine himself, shaking the hand of every single graduate today. When was the last time you saw something like that? Imagine Kamala Harris doing that. Imagine Mike Pence doing that. Imagine CNN or MSNBC covering that. They never would. Not today and not 40 years ago. The difference between the media today and the media then is one thing. The difference between the media in 1985 and the media in 2025 is one thing, and it's got two words, but it's definitely not these two words.
Start off with two words. Made in America. Made in America.
Yeah, that's not two words, Joe, is it? We'll move on. The answer's simple. It's Donald Trump. But this notion that the media is somehow more biased today than it was decades ago just isn't true. As long as there's been TV news, there has been bias. As long as there has been TV news, there has been anti-Republican TV news. I worked in Kansas City years ago. I visited the Walter Cronkite Museum out there once, but Walter Cronkite used to go sailing with the Kennedys and the Clintons. Do you think for a second that Walter Cronkite wasn't biased? Edward R. Murrow, the patron saint of journalism, worked for Adlai Stevenson's campaign for president. Adlai Stevenson was a Democrat. He ran for president twice. Do you think that Edward R. Murrow wasn't biased? Do you remember how anti-Republican Dan Rather was?
1/4 of the people who say that, they rather like you, believe you're hiding something. Now, if you are, here's a chance to get it out.
You know what I'm hiding? What I told the president. That's the only thing.
You said that if you had known this was an arms for hostages swap, that you would have opposed it. You also said that you did not know that...
May I answer that?
That wasn't a question. It was a statement.
Yes, it was a statement, and
Let me ask the question, if I may, first. The president himself has said he wants all the facts out. He gave up such things as even his own diary. Every principal, including Secretary Schultz, he gave up some of it.
Well, Dan, let's be careful here, because you're...
Yes, sir, I want you to be careful, Mr. Vice President, because of the problem.
I will be careful.
Are you willing to go to a news conference before the Iowa caucuses, answer questions from all comers?
Since March.
I gather that the answer is no. Thank you very much for being with us, Mr. Vice President.
That was 1988. You remember when Dan Rather, a few years later, made up a story about George W. Bush 2 months before the 2004 election? It was the Hunter Biden laptop back then, but the media covered it. Turned out the documents he based the entire story on for 60 Minutes were fake. Dan Rather was out of a job a year later, which might remind you of the most recent CBS News anchor, so obviously pro-Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that she lost her job too.
He landed in Green Bay just a short time ago and then pulled this campaign stunt, speaking to reporters from a garbage truck. Proof that he and his supporters are giving no grace to a gaffe by President Biden, where he, in his explanation, inadvertently called Trump supporters garbage. This, of course, was in response to that racist joke about floating garbage told at a Trump rally just last weekend. Vice President Harris is distancing herself from the negativity and trying to drive home her unifying message that if elected, she will represent all Americans.
All right, this headline a day ago actually made me laugh. Washington Post, quote, "If Biden was too frail for his job, voters should have been informed," like it's some kind of public service announcement or something. Voters should have been informed. Washington Post, it's your job to inform them. Republican voters knew what was going on. They voted for Donald Trump. Anyone with eyes and a brain knew what was going on. But the Washington Post ignored the story. Transparency is essential for democratic processes to operate as intended. Again, like a public service announcement. This coming from the same newspaper that didn't print a word about Biden cognitive impairment until after the June debate. This from the same newspaper that brought down Richard Nixon, the same paper that investigated Watergate. Watergate at the time, the biggest political scandal in presidential history. They made a movie about it. It was such a big deal, you've probably seen the movie. 1976, All the President's Men. It was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman played the Washington Post reporters who broke that story. Fast forward 50 years to today, and the Washington Post went from investigating a story which brought down an American president to their headline this week, "If Biden was too frail for his job, voters should have been informed." The media went from Watergate, and I personally don't think Nixon should have ever resigned, that's just my opinion, but the media went from Watergate to watered down. And for further proof of that, take a look at this exchange.
The president showed a video that he said showed more than 1,000 burial sites of white South Africans that he said were murdered. We know that that was not true and that the video wasn't showing that. So I wonder, why did the president choose to show that? What's not true, Yamiche? It's not true that the video was showing a burial site. It is unsubstantiated that that's the case.
No, it is true that that video showed the crosses that represent,
which is what the president claimed.
The video showed images of crosses in South Africa about white farmers who have been killed and politically persecuted because of the color of their skin.
Who at the
No,
White House?
it did show that. It showed white crosses representing people who have perished because of racial persecution.
Verifies the videos that the president shows, and what protocols are in place when there's unsubstantiated information being put out for the world and world leaders to show?
Yamiche, what's unsubstantiated about the video? The video shows crosses that represent the dead bodies of people who were racially persecuted by their government. In fact, the Associated Press, of all places, has a picture of that very monument, and the caption from the Associated Press is, "Each cross marks a white farmer who has been killed in a farm murder."
All right, so that reporter right there works for NBC News. No surprise there. And during the same week that the book about the 5-year Joe Biden health cover-up and the cover-up of that cover-up came out, this reporter thinks the appropriate question to ask the White House press secretary is what protocols are in place when there is unsubstantiated video put out to the world. You cannot make this stuff up. For 4 years, the media, other politicians, and more importantly, the American people were lied to every single day by the Biden White House. Every single day, America had a man with dementia, and now we know cancer, in charge. And never once was a question like that ever posed to the White House press secretary. Instead, we got this.
The president blamed jet lag for his debate performance.
I think in addition to the 2 major trips, he was also continued to do his presidential duties. He worked late in doing that, and he also prepared for the debate. And on top of that, there was obviously the jet lag. It is not a cover-up. I know that is the narrative that you all want. It is not. We're seeing these deep fakes, these manipulated videos, and it is, again, done in bad faith.
The saddest part of this whole story, if they made all the president's men today, it would have a different name. It would be a much different movie. Instead, all the reporters who took part in the cover-up of the cover-up would play starring roles. Whoopi Goldberg would play Whoopi Goldberg, and she would play Kamala Harris. Danny DeVito would play Brian Stelter. Beaker from the Muppets would play Joe Scarborough. And of course, George Clooney would play Jake Tapper. The movie would be called All Joe Biden's Men and Women and Persons. And everyone on the left would hate it because for once Hollywood would finally have made a movie that told the truth about Joe Biden and the Democrats.